Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back to ancient Rome, a place where the streets echoed with sandals slapping against stone, and the air was thick with the smell of roasted meat, burning incense, and political schemes. But tonight's story isn't about gladiators or wars or even emperors behaving badly, well, at least not in the way you're used to. Tonight, we're unravelling the absurd tale of the day a Roman emperor decided, out of sheer whimsy or perhaps too much wine, to throw a grand feast entirely without meat, cheese or fish. Yes, you heard that right. A vegan feast in ancient Rome. You wouldn't last 5 minutes at this dinner, I promise you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. It's always fun to see where you're all drifting off to sleep. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander through the winding streets of Rome, the soles of your sandals tapping against the uneven stone roads. The sun has just begun to set, casting a golden glow across the city's towering columns and bustling forums. The smell of grilled meats wafts from nearby taverns, mixing with the scent of olive oil and sweet wine. But tonight there's a different buzz in the air. The merchants are closing their stalls early, whispering to one another with amused, incredulous looks. You overhear snatches of conversation, words like madness, fool's errand, and even blasphemy. Curiosity tugs at you, and you follow the murmurs toward the heart of the city. Along the way you pass by familiar sights, a woman selling figs under an awning, a group of children chasing a stray dog, and a baker pulling golden loaves from his stone oven. But even these everyday scenes feel tinged with something strange tonight. The baker shakes his head and mutters, "A feast with no meat? What's next? A toga made from turnips?" You keep walking, drawn by the growing excitement, until you reach the grand steps of the Capitoline Hill. Here the crowd has gathered, and all eyes are fixed on the towering facade of the imperial palace. A herald steps forward, his robe gleaming under the torchlight. With dramatic flair he unfurls a scroll and proclaims in a booming voice, "By decree of the Emperor, tonight's banquet shall feature not a single morsel of meat, fish, or dairy. All dishes shall be crafted from the bounty of the earth alone." Gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone behind you mutters, "He's finally lost it." You glance around and see that you're not the only one bewildered. The wealthy patricians nearby look utterly scandalized, clutching their fine cloaks as if shielding themselves from the very idea of vegetables. Even the street vendors, normally too busy to care about imperial whims, are shaking their heads. One old fruit seller chuckles softly. They say he saw it in a dream, Bacchus himself offering him a salad. You can't help but laugh under your breath at the thought. A Roman emperor famed for lavish orgies and rivers of wine, now pushing bowls of lentils and figs onto his guests. It's almost too ridiculous to believe. But here you are standing among the murmuring crowd, watching as the palace doors swing open with a groan. Inside, servants scurry to and fro, carrying platters covered in embroidered cloths. The torches flicker, casting strange shadows on the marble columns. You step closer, your curiosity outweighing your caution. And as you peer into the palace, you can just make out the glimmering banquet hall beyond, already filling with senators, generals, and other high-ranking officials, each one eyeing the covered dishes with a mixture of dread and disbelief. You overhear a senator grumble, "If I wanted to eat grass, I'd graze in the fields." Another chuckles bitterly. "At least we won't have to worry about indigestion. Starvation, perhaps." Their words make you grin, but you can't help but feel a bit intrigued. What could possibly have possessed the emperor to pull such a stunt? Was it really just a dream? Or was there something else at play here? As the crowd begins to disperse, you linger near the entrance, watching as the guests reluctantly take their seats at the long, lavishly decorated tables. And there, at the head of it all, sits the Emperor himself, smiling serenely, as if he's just discovered the secret to eternal life in a head of lettuce. Somewhere in the back of your mind you wonder, could this actually work? After all, the Romans had seen stranger things. Gladiators who claimed to be descended from gods, oracles who spoke in riddles, even philosophers who argued that the universe was made of water or air. But a vegan feast? This was uncharted territory. As you watch the first dishes begin to emerge from the kitchen, carried by nervous servants, you can't help but feel that tonight will be one for the history scrolls. The kind of night people would whisper about for generations, as they tucked into their roasted boar and honeyed dormice. And somewhere deep down you already know, you wouldn't last 5 minutes at this dinner. But you're here now and there's no turning back. The night is just beginning. The streets slowly quiet as night settles in, but you can't seem to pull yourself away from the palace gates. There's a strange magnetism to the whole affair, like watching a ship slowly drift toward the rocks. You inch closer, close enough now to hear the clinking of goblets and the low hum of awkward conversation echoing from within. Inside, the Emperor rises from his cushioned seat. Draped in a tunic embroidered with grapevines and ivy leaves, he looks every bit the eccentric ruler the people whisper about. He raises his goblet high, though tonight it's filled not with wine, but with a strange pale liquid. Tonight, he begins, his voice rich and amused, we feast as the earth intended. No beast need suffer, no fish need swim into our nets. Tonight we dine on gifts from the soil alone. A polite smattering of applause follows, though it's clear no one knows whether to laugh or weep. You lean in, listening as he continues, explaining how his vision, yes, it was definitely a dream, showed him a banquet where every dish was drawn from fields and gardens. Bacchus himself, lounging on a cloud of grape leaves, had supposedly instructed him to host this noble experiment. The Emperor's grin widens as he concludes his speech with a flourish. And if it pleases me, perhaps it shall become a tradition. At that, several guests visibly blanch. You can almost see the calculations behind their eyes. How long could they survive on beans and barley before mutiny became inevitable? You stifle a chuckle, watching the spectacle unfold. Soon the first course arrives. Servants, their faces betraying their embarrassment, unveil platters arranged with an almost comical reverence. Fresh figs glisten under a drizzle of honey, surrounded by walnuts and sprigs of rosemary. Bowls of barley salad, studded with pomegranate seeds, shimmer in the torchlight. A towering centerpiece of roasted root vegetables, beets, carrots, parsnips, sits atop a bed of wild greens, sculpted into the shape of a reclining satyr. It's absurd, and yet undeniably beautiful in a way only Roman excess could manage. You watch as the guests reluctantly sample their portions. A senator pokes suspiciously at a roasted artichoke heart before taking a small, grudging bite. His expression shifts from disgust to mild confusion. Well, he mutters, loud enough for nearby diners to hear, it's not poison. Laughter ripples through the room, breaking some of the tension. The Emperor claps his hands, clearly delighted. See? He calls out, raising his goblet again. You mock, but the earth provides. You can't help but smile. There's something almost endearing about his earnestness, as misguided as it may be. As the courses continue, the dishes grow increasingly elaborate and bizarre. There's a pie filled with lentils, dates, and crushed almonds, its crust glazed with saffron-infused olive oil. A soup thickened with pureed chickpeas and garnished with edible flowers arrives next, its aroma both floral and faintly grassy. Every bite seems designed to make the diners question their life choices. Still, you notice something curious. Despite the endless grumbling, the plates are slowly emptying. Hunger, after all, has a way of humbling even the proudest Roman noble. Somewhere near the end of the third course, a slightly tipsy merchant leans toward his neighbour and murmurs, "I heard the emperor's pet monkey helped choose the recipes." You nearly choke on laughter, but manage to keep your composure. As the evening wears on, the conversation grows looser, the initial outrage giving way to reluctant amusement. The emperor himself laughs heartily at the absurdity of it all, clearly reveling in the fact that his guests, many of whom had mocked him in secret, are now chewing dutifully on sprigs of thyme and spoonfuls of lentil mash. Amidst the laughter, however, you catch a different note from an elderly philosopher seated near the dais. He strokes his beard thoughtfully and mutters, "There is wisdom in this. The Stoics believed in moderation, after all. Meat dulls the mind." Another guest overhears and snorts loudly. "If I wanted to dull my mind, I'd drink 6 amphorae of wine, not chew on weeds." Still, his words linger in your mind as you watch the feast unfold. The truth is, vegetarianism wasn't entirely unheard of in Rome. You recall whispers of philosophers like Pythagoras and Seneca, who advocated for plant-based diets, though they were often dismissed as oddballs or zealots. Even in their time, their ideas were met with skepticism, sometimes outright scorn. But here, tonight, under the gilded ceilings of the imperial palace, those ideas have taken center stage. For better or worse, this feast has become more than a strange whim. It's a statement, a challenge, and whether they liked it or not, every guest here would have to reckon with it. You watch as the emperor leans back in his chair, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Perhaps," he muses aloud, "this is the future of Rome." The room bursts into laughter once more, though it's unclear whether they're laughing at him or out of sheer relief that dessert is finally being served. And as trays of honey-soaked pears and almond cakes are brought forth, you can't help but wonder what madness the night still holds. Because, as every Roman knows, the weirder the beginning, the stranger the ending. And tonight? Tonight is just getting started. You lean casually against a marble column, half hidden in the shadows, watching the spectacle unfold with growing amusement. It's not every night that you witness Rome's most powerful men, those who usually feast on roasted peacocks and honey-glazed dormice, grimacing over bowls of lentils and barley. But tonight things have taken a sharp turn toward the bizarre. As the servers clear away the remnants of the previous course, the emperor rises once more, his robes swirling dramatically as he gestures for silence. His face glows with the kind of glee usually reserved for children unveiling their newest toy. "My friends," he declares, his voice echoing through the hall, "you've sampled the delights of the garden and the grove. But now prepare your palates for the miracle of legumes." You hear a few groans and a barely stifled snicker from somewhere near the back of the room. With a grand flourish, the servants unveil the next course. Platters piled high with every imaginable bean and pulse. Chickpeas, lentils, fava beans and peas, all arranged in intricate mosaics resembling scenes from mythology. Here, a depiction of Hercules wrestling a lion, crafted entirely from black and white beans. There a mosaic of Venus rising from the sea, her flowing hair rendered in artfully curled shavings of parsnip. It's both impressive and utterly ridiculous. You can't help but grin at the absurdity. You've seen plenty of elaborate Roman banquets, but this is performance art. A senator nearby mutters under his breath, "I didn't claw my way to the Senate to gnaw on chickpeas." Still, curiosity gets the better of them, Slowly, hesitantly, they begin to sample the dishes. The room fills with the soft clinking of spoons against bowls, the occasional murmur of surprise. "This one tastes like garlic and cumin," someone says, sounding almost impressed. Another diner exclaims, "By Jupiter, I can't feel my tongue. Is that mustard seed?" You chuckle softly. Roman cuisine has always been an adventure, but these flavors, sharp, earthy, foreign, are a far cry from the familiar comforts of roasted meats and rich cheeses. And yet, as strange as it all seems, you notice something fascinating. The longer the guests eat, the less they complain. Perhaps it's the wine, or rather the watered-down grape must that passes for wine tonight. Or perhaps it's simply hunger overriding pride. Either way, the diners are beginning to settle in, their laughter growing more genuine, their postures relaxing. The emperor watches with obvious satisfaction, his fingers drumming idly against his goblet. "See?" he calls out, his tone dripping with amusement. The body craves simplicity. It is the mind that complicates desire. You can't tell whether he's quoting a philosopher or just making it up on the spot, but either way it works. Soon the room is buzzing with conversation. Guests swap theories about the origins of various dishes, debating whether one particular stew contains Syrian lentils or Egyptian fava beans. A few even begin sharing their own household recipes for barley porridge or stewed leeks, though always with a self-deprecating laugh. Somewhere near the dais, an elderly senator leans back and muses aloud. "Perhaps we've been too harsh. After all, didn't the Vestal virgins subsist largely on grain and fruit?" His companion snorts, "Yes, and they also had to remain celibate. Hardly the ideal lifestyle." The table erupts into laughter once again. You lean back against the cool marble, savouring the moment. It's rare to see such powerful men humbled, if only temporarily, by something as simple as a bean stew. And yet, as you observe the scene, you sense a subtle shift in the air. Beneath the laughter and the clinking of goblets, there's a note of unease, a faint undercurrent of rebellion brewing just below the surface. It's not just about the food, it never is. You remember a lesson from a street philosopher you once met near the Forum. In Rome, everything is political, even dinner. And tonight, this vegan feast feels less like a culinary experiment and more like a test of loyalty. A way for the emperor to see who would submit, who would mock him openly, and who might harbour more dangerous thoughts. You scan the room, watching as the emperor's gaze drifts from table to table, sharp and calculating behind his playful smile. He knows exactly what he's doing. And suddenly you realise this isn't just dinner. It's theatre. A grand performance with every guest playing their assigned role, whether they realise it or not. As the servants bring out yet another course, flatbreads brushed with olive oil and sprinkled with exotic herbs, you can't help but wonder, how far will the emperor push this little charade? And more importantly, how far will his guests let him go before someone finally snaps? You lean in, listening closely as one of the senators mutters darkly to his neighbour, "If he serves us boiled cabbage next, I'm defecting to Gaul." God. You smile to yourself. Something tells you this night is far from over. And as you watch the emperor raise his goblet once more, a mischievous glint in his eyes, you can't shake the feeling that the strangest course has yet to come. Because in Rome the line between comedy and tragedy has always been as thin as a vine of ivy curling along a marble pillar. And tonight that line is about to blur. The laughter slowly fades as the next course arrives, and a hush settles over the banquet hall. You watch with growing curiosity as the servants file in, balancing towering platters piled with unfamiliar dishes. There's a certain smugness to their movements now, as if they've begun to embrace the ridiculousness of it all. On each table, the centerpiece of this course is revealed, a sprawling salad unlike anything Rome has ever seen. Bright green lettuce leaves glisten under a sheen of olive oil, layered with roasted squash, figs, and tender asparagus tips. Sprinkled atop it all are slivers of toasted almonds and glistening pomegranate seeds, their jewel-like shine catching the torchlight. It's beautiful, you have to admit, but it's still salad. You watch as the guests eye their plates with suspicion. One bold soul pokes at a slice of melon nestled among the greens and mutters, "Is this meant to be dinner or a garden display?" Still, they're too polite, or perhaps too terrified to refuse. As you nibble on a stray pomegranate seed plucked from the edge of a platter, the Emperor's voice cuts through the low murmur of conversation. "Ah," he says, rising again with a flourish, "you behold the nectar of the fields, a dish to cleanse the spirit and invigorate the mind." He gestures dramatically toward the tables, clearly reveling in his audience's discomfort. "It is said," he continues, "that the gods themselves feast on such things. For what are we, if not creatures of the earth? We toil in the soil, we harvest its fruits. Should we not also honor it at our tables?" You can't help but smirk. It's a convincing speech if you ignore the fact that most Romans would rather gnaw on their own sandals than eat cold vegetables for dinner. Still, there's something almost admirable about his commitment to the bit. He's playing this role to the hilt, with the confidence of an actor on the stage of the forum. As the guests pick through their salads, you notice a few flashes of genuine surprise. "This dressing," one of them mutters. "What is that flavour?" A nearby philosopher leans in, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Ground pine nuts, vinegar, and crushed dates," he whispers. "A recipe from Carthage, I believe." The senator arches an eyebrow. "Carthage, you say? No wonder it tastes like defeat." The table bursts into laughter once again, though the senator looks quietly pleased with himself for landing the joke. You can't help but admire the resilience of Roman humour. Even in the face of culinary absurdity, they find a way to laugh, usually at someone else's expense. Still, as you watch the emperor from your perch near the column, you notice something else. His eyes aren't on the food or the guests. No, he's watching the room itself, studying the shifting alliances, the whispered conversations, the subtle glances passed between diners. He's measuring them, weighing their reactions like a merchant testing coins for authenticity. And suddenly you realize the truth. This isn't just about vegetables. This is about power. A test hidden beneath layers of lettuce and squash. The emperor wants to see who will fall in line, who will resist, and who will pretend to enjoy every bite just to keep their seat at the table. It's brilliant in its own twisted way. You glance around the room, spotting familiar faces, generals, senators, wealthy merchants, all locked in this strange dance of forced politeness and reluctant amusement. And amidst it all, the emperor smiles. As the salad course winds down, the servers return to clear the tables. You catch snippets of conversation drifting through the air. Do you think he's serious about making this a tradition? By the gods, I hope not. Honestly, it wasn't that bad. That last remark catches your attention. You follow the voice and spot a younger senator, perhaps no more than 30, speaking earnestly to his table mates. "I mean it," he says, gesturing with his fork. "There's something refreshing about it. Light, clean." His companions stare at him as if he's just sprouted goat horns. You almost laugh out loud, but you catch yourself just in time. Because there it is, exactly what the emperor wanted. A seed, quietly planted, now taking root. Whether intentional or not, tonight's absurd feast has sparked something. A conversation, a question, and in Rome that's all it ever takes. As the final bites of salad disappear, the emperor rises once more, his face glowing with triumph. "Ah, my friends," he purrs, his voice soft and syrupy. "You've survived thus far. But beware, The night is still young, and the garden holds many more secrets yet. His words send a ripple of laughter through the hall, though there's a nervous edge to it now. You lean back against the column, your mind racing. This night is far from over, and something tells you. The strangest course is still to come, because if there's one thing you've learned living in Rome, it's this. Never trust a man who smiles that much during a dinner party. You shift your weight against the cool marble column, your arms crossed, as the servants begin to prepare for the next round of culinary theatre. There's a brief lull in the chatter, as if the entire room is bracing itself for whatever absurdity might come next. The air feels thick now, not with the usual roasted meats and spices, but with anticipation, and maybe just a touch of dread. The Emperor remains seated, his fingers laced together as he observes the room with that same sly grin. You can't help but notice how amused he looks, almost as if this whole charade is his personal joke, and only he knows the punchline. Suddenly a loud clang breaks the quiet. The great bronze doors at the far end of the hall swing open, revealing a line of servants carrying ornate trays, each covered in embroidered cloth. A hush falls over the guests. One by one the servants place the trays along the tables, moving with the precision of soldiers in a parade. The Emperor raises his hand, and with a single, dramatic snap of his fingers, the cloths are whisked away in unison. You lean forward, unable to resist the reveal. The hall fills with gasps. Before each guest sits a golden platter, upon which rests what appears, at first glance, to be a whole roasted bird, complete with crispy skin, glistening under a sheen of oil. But as the guests lean closer, their expressions shift from awe to confusion, because these aren't birds at all. They're elaborate sculptures, crafted from layers of mashed chickpeas, seasoned grains, and moulded lentil paste. Each bird has been carefully shaped and painted with vegetable dyes to mimic roasted fowl, right down to the delicate char marks along the wings. It's impressive, in a slightly unsettling way. You hear one senator whisper, "By the gods, it looks like pheasant." Another mutters, "Smells like cumin and garlic." The Emperor chuckles softly, clearly enjoying the bewilderment. "Behold," he announces, his voice echoing through the hall, "the illusion of indulgence, a feast for the eyes and the conscience alike." He gestures grandly toward the platters. "Tonight we dine not on what was, but on what could be." A few guests exchange uneasy glances, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But hunger is a powerful force. Slowly, reluctantly, they begin to carve into the sculptures. Spoons and knives cut through the outer layer, revealing soft, savoury fillings inside. Mixtures of herbs, grains, and pureed vegetables, all seasoned with exotic spices from the East. You watch as the first bites are taken, hesitant but curious. Surprisingly, some diners nod in approval. It's not unpleasant, one admits. Strange, another adds, but the spices are bold, almost like sausage. Laughter erupts from a nearby table, and for a brief moment the tension eases. Still, you can't help but notice the Emperor's eyes scanning the room, watching every reaction, every twitch of a brow, every forced smile. He's studying them, testing them. And beneath the surface, something darker simmers. You lean toward a nearby merchant, pretending to study your own plate, and hear him mutter under his breath, "He's toying with us, seeing who bends." You glance at him, and he offers a tight, knowing smile before returning to his meal. The thought sends a chill down your spine. Because he's right. This isn't just about food anymore, it's about loyalty, submission, control. And you wonder, just how far will this game go? As the course winds on, the room grows louder, the guests loosening under the influence of fermented grape juice, weak as it may be. The absurdity of the evening begins to feel almost normal. Some even start making jokes. Perhaps next will be served oysters made from olives, one snickers, or honey cakes shaped like roasted boar. Another laughs. The emperor grins, clearly pleased by their playful acceptance. But then he speaks again, his voice calm and steady. "My friends," he says, raising his goblet, "consider this. Tonight you have feasted well, with no blood spilled, no creature slain, no guilt upon your hearts." He lets the words hang in the air. "Perhaps," he continues, his tone softening, "this is the true luxury, freedom from excess, from gluttony, from the chains of habit." His words stir something in the room. You can see it, the flickers of thought behind weary eyes, the way some guests glance down at their plates with newfound unease. And somewhere deep within you, a tiny seed of doubt is planted too. Could he be right? Is it possible that this ridiculous, farcical feast holds some strange wisdom after all? But before you can linger on the thought, the emperor flashes a mischievous smile. "Of course," he adds with a playful wink, "we still have dessert." The room erupts in cheers and laughter, the moment of introspection vanishing like smoke in the wind. You lean back against the marble, exhaling slowly. This night is a labyrinth, and you're not sure you'll find your way out unscathed. Because in Rome, even dinner can become a battlefield. And tonight, you've only just crossed the threshold. The laughter still lingers as the servants swiftly clear the remnants of the faux-roasted birds, their faces betraying no emotion, though you wonder if they're secretly amused by the chaos they've just delivered. But there's no time to dwell on it. The emperor rises again, clapping his hands twice. The sound reverberates through the hall, silencing the guests. With a voice dripping with exaggerated cheer, he announces, "And now, we enter the sweeter part of the garden." A ripple of intrigue washes over the room. Even the most cynical diners perk up at the mention of dessert. After all, no matter how strange the evening has been, dessert is dessert. You watch closely as the palace doors swing open once more, and the servants march in, each carrying a gleaming silver platter. The torches flicker, casting dancing shadows across the walls as the trays are placed before each guest. With another dramatic flourish, the emperor snaps his fingers and the covers are lifted. Gasps fill the room. Before each guest lies a delicately molded creation, a shimmering dome of what appears to be jelly, translucent and golden, studded with bits of fruit and nuts. It glows softly under the light, like captured sunlight on a platter. Whispers ripple through the hall. "Is that a pudding?" "No, it looks like some kind of jelly." "It wobbles like a politician's promises." You stifle a laugh at that last remark, but your curiosity is piqued. You lean in for a closer look, and the aroma hits you, a heady mix of honey, citrus, and exotic spices. The emperor beams with pride. "Behold," he declares, gesturing grandly toward the dishes, "nectar of the gods, a confection crafted from almonds, honey, and the finest gelatin extracted from seaweed gathered along the African coast." A senator nearly chokes on his wine. "Seaweed?" he splutters, horrified. The emperor's eyes gleam with mischief. Indeed, no bones, no hooves, pure, clean, and utterly virtuous. The room erupts into nervous laughter, but the scent is too alluring to resist. Slowly spoons dip into the shimmering domes. You follow suit, scooping up a trembling spoonful of the dessert. The texture is unlike anything you've ever encountered. Silky, smooth, and almost ethereal, with a delicate sweetness that melts on your tongue. Around the room, reactions range from cautious delight to outright bliss. "This is divine," one guest admits, eyes widening. Another chuckles, "Finally something worth eating tonight." Even the most skeptical senators seem enchanted by the dessert. The tension eases, replaced by the comforting haze that only sugar can bring. You glance toward the emperor, and there he is, watching it all unfold, his expression a perfect mask of benevolence. But you've been watching him closely all night, and you see it, the flicker of something else behind that smile. Satisfaction, yes, but also calculation. Because this isn't just dessert, it's victory. He's won them over. They've laughed, they've eaten, they've marvelled, and now they're his. You shake your head, both amused and impressed by the subtle brilliance of it all. As the guests savour their final bites, the emperor rises once more, his goblet raised high. "My friends," he says, his voice smooth and honeyed, "tonight we have dined as no Romans have before. We have feasted on the bounty of the earth, honoured the gifts of the garden, and discovered that even the humblest ingredients can bring great joy." He pauses, letting the words sink in. "Remember this night," he continues, his eyes sweeping across the room. "For it is not the sword or the spear that defines Rome, but the mind, the spirit, and the courage to taste the unknown." The room bursts into applause, loud and enthusiastic this time, not out of fear or politeness, but genuine admiration. You can hardly believe it. They came in mocking him, dreading every bite, and now they're cheering. You sit back, marvelling at the transformation. Somehow, through a mixture of absurdity, charm, and sheer audacity, the emperor has turned this strange experiment into a triumph. But as the applause fades and the guests begin to rise from their seats, you can't help but wonder, was this ever really about the food at all? Because in Rome, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. And as you watch the emperor, his eyes gleaming under the flickering torchlight, you realize something else. This night isn't over yet, not by a long shot. You sense another twist coming, because there's always a twist, especially in a city where every banquet hides a dagger behind the curtain. And tonight you're seated in the front row. The applause finally fades, leaving behind a soft murmur of contented conversation, the kind that usually follows a successful feast. The guests lean back in their cushioned seats, their cheeks flushed from fermented grape juice, their bellies, though perhaps not entirely full, at least pleasantly sated. But you, ever the observer, feel the subtle shift in the air. The emperor hasn't moved from his seat. He's watching, waiting, as if savouring a secret that the others have yet to discover. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he rises. The room quiets instantly, every eye locked on him. "My honoured guests," he begins, his tone calm and measured. "Though the night wanes, there remains one final course." A wave of polite groans rises from the tables, mingled with nervous laughter. After everything they've already endured, barley, beans, moulded chickpea birds, and seaweed jelly, what else could possibly be left? You feel the same question creeping into your mind, accompanied by an odd mixture of dread and curiosity. The emperor smiles, a slow, knowing grin. "This last dish," he says, "is not meant for your mouths, but for your minds." Confused glances dart across the room. Whispers ripple like wind through wheat. Without another word, the servants reappear, carrying small, delicate scrolls tied with silk ribbons. They move gracefully, placing one before each guest with the solemnity of priests presenting sacred relics. You watch intrigued as the guests untie the ribbons and unfurl the scrolls. Each contains a message, handwritten in fine flowing script. A senator nearby squints at his scroll, muttering the words under his breath. You strain to listen. It's a riddle about food no less. What feeds the belly, never touches the tongue, yet rules every feast? The room buzzes with confusion and amusement. Some guests laugh, others frown in concentration. A few begin to murmur guesses to their neighbours. Salt? Money? Wine? The emperor watches them with obvious delight, his fingers steepled under his chin. You smile to yourself, recognizing the brilliance of the move. Even now when their stomachs are full and their guards are lowered, he's keeping them engaged, pulling them deeper into his web. Minutes pass as the guests debate, their voices growing louder, their answers wilder. Finally the emperor raises a hand, calling for silence. I see, he says, chuckling softly, that this riddle has stirred your minds. He gestures to the scrolls. The answer, he declares, is hunger. A stunned pause fills the hall. Hunger rules every feast, he explains, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. It brings you to the table, shapes your desires, and lingers long after the plates are cleared. He lets the words settle, their weight pressing down on the room. Hunger, he repeats, softer now, is the master of all men. It humbles kings and lifts peasants. It binds us all whether we dine on figs or on fowl. A hush falls over the guests. Even the most sceptical among them seem struck by the simplicity and the truth of his words. You feel it too, that quiet thread of shared humanity woven through every corner of the hall. It's unsettling. The emperor's eyes gleam as he surveys the room, clearly pleased with the effect. He leans forward slightly, his voice lowering to a near whisper. Tonight, he says, we've dined without meat or wine, without gluttony or excess, and yet here we sit, content, thoughtful, and perhaps a little wiser. He pauses, allowing the moment to stretch, as if daring anyone to disagree. No one does. You watch as he straightens, his smile widening. And so, he concludes, raising his goblet one last time, let this night remind us all, Rome is not merely a city of stone and steel, but of spirit. The guests raise their goblets in unison, their faces softened by the strange magic of the evening. To spirit, they echo. You remain still, your heart beating a little faster than before, because somehow, against all odds, he's done it. He's taken a feast built on mockery and turned it into something almost profound. The guests begin to rise from their seats, still discussing the riddle, their laughter lighter now, touched with genuine warmth. And yet, as they filter out into the cool Roman night, you can't shake a lingering question. Did he truly intend for this to be a lesson about humility and hunger? Or was it all just another layer of his carefully crafted theatre? You glance back at the emperor, still seated at the head of the table, watching his guests depart with that same enigmatic smile. And you know, deep down, you'll never really know the answer. Because in Rome, truth is always served with a garnish of mystery. And tonight, you've tasted both. The guests begin to drift out of the banquet hall, their robes trailing softly along the mosaic floor, their footsteps lightened by honey and riddles. Some are still murmuring about the feast, others laughing about the riddle, and a few simply look relieved to breathe in the cool night air again. But you stay. You remain by your marble post, watching as the emperor lingers at the head of the long, emptied table, fingers drumming idly on the wood, his eyes distant yet sharp. And then, without warning, he speaks again, his voice cutting through the remaining quiet like a knife through soft cheese. Not all hunger, he muses aloud, comes from the belly. You blink, unsure whether he's talking to the remaining few guests or simply thinking aloud. He doesn't look at anyone in particular as he continues, his tone softer, more reflective now. "There is another kind," he says, his gaze distant. "A hunger that gnaws at the mind, the thirst for novelty, for attention, for applause. A craving to be remembered." His words settle heavily in the air, drawing a thoughtful silence from those few who still linger. You remain frozen, barely breathing, unwilling to miss a single word. The Emperor leans back in his chair, staring up at the painted ceiling where gods and goddesses dance among clouds and stars. "You see," he continues, his voice almost wistful now, "I have tasted every dish this empire offers. Roasted flamingo tongues, oysters dragged from Britannic shores, honeyed dates from Syria, peacock eggs boiled in spiced wine." He chuckles softly to himself. "And yet," he says, his voice dipping low, "none of it satisfies for long." He finally lowers his gaze, scanning the hall once more, though his eyes seem to look beyond the walls, beyond the people, beyond everything. "Power," he murmurs, "is the only dish that leaves me full." The few remaining guests exchange uneasy glances, unsure whether this is still part of the performance or something else. But you see it clearly now. This isn't part of the act. This is something raw, unguarded, and somehow you realize you've wandered into a private moment hidden in plain sight. The Emperor rises slowly from his chair, his robes falling in heavy folds around him. He walks toward the great balcony overlooking the city, his steps measured but unhurried. You follow him with your gaze as he stands there, silhouetted against the torchlit rooftops of Rome. From here the city stretches endlessly in every direction, a sea of tiled roofs, marble temples, bustling forums, and quiet gardens. It's breathtaking, yes, but also fragile. The Emperor raises his arms slightly as if embracing the entire city. "Do you hear it?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper now. The hall remains still, but the sounds of Rome drift in. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the laughter of drunkards, the low hum of merchants packing up their wares. "That," he says, "is the true feast." He turns back to face the room, his expression calm but unreadable. "Feeding this city," he continues, "is a task no banquet can match. Its appetite is endless, its hunger eternal." A pause, and then, with a faint, almost amused smile, he adds, "But tonight at least, it has tasted something new." He begins to walk away from the balcony, his steps soft, his demeanour once again composed, mask firmly back in place. As he passes by the last remaining guests, he offers a simple nod and a faint smile, as if none of the evening's revelations had ever occurred. And then, just before vanishing into the shadows of the palace corridors, he turns ever so slightly and says, almost playfully, "Remember, hunger always returns." With that he disappears, leaving behind only the lingering scent of honey and spices. The guests stand in stunned silence, unsure whether they've just witnessed wisdom, madness, or some curious blend of both. And you? You remain rooted in place, your mind swirling with everything you've seen and heard tonight. The feast, the riddles, the quiet confession of a ruler who understands his people better than they'll ever understand him. You realize something in that moment. This wasn't merely a dinner. It was a reminder that in Rome, every act, no matter how absurd, holds meaning. And every hunger, whether of the body, the mind, or the spirit, will always inevitably return. You finally step away from your post, slipping quietly into the cool night beyond the palace gates. But as you walk, you carry something heavier than a full stomach. A strange sense that tonight you've been fed far more than food. And somehow, You won't forget this meal for as long as you live. The night outside is cool and quiet, but your mind is anything but. As you drift away from the palace gates, leaving behind the fading torchlight and the scent of olive oil and sweet herbs, the city seems to shift around you. Rome at night has a way of feeling like an entirely different place. The streets are nearly empty now, save for the occasional stray cat slinking through alleyways or a weary merchant hauling his cart home. The distant murmur of the Tiber River winds through the air, mingling with the rustling of fig trees in hidden gardens. But your thoughts are still trapped within the marble walls of that banquet hall. You replay every strange detail, the moulded chickpea birds, the shimmering seaweed jelly, the scrolls with their cryptic riddles, and of course the emperor's quiet confession about the endless hunger of the city. You can't shake it, because somewhere, deep down, you know this wasn't just a bizarre evening of culinary tricks. It was a warning. As you wander toward the quieter part of the city, your sandals tapping softly against the worn stones, you pass by a group of men seated around a small fire outside a modest tavern. Their laughter floats through the air, cheerful and unguarded, as they tear hunks of bread and pass around a jug of wine. One of them gestures wildly, clearly telling some exaggerated story, and the others roar with laughter. You pause for a moment, watching them from a distance. There's something comforting about it, the simplicity of their meal, the ease of their camaraderie. No elaborate dishes, no gilded plates, no hidden meanings tucked between courses. Just bread, wine, and friendship. And yet, the same hunger lingers here too. You realize it in their eyes, in the way they glance toward the brighter parts of the city where marble villas gleam under the moonlight. They laugh, yes, but they also long. Hunger isn't just in the palace. It's here too, beneath every worn tunic, behind every calloused hand. You continue walking, your thoughts growing heavier with every step. Soon you reach a quieter street lined with the homes of scholars and scribes, simple but respectable dwellings, where lamps burn late into the night. Outside one such house you spot an elderly philosopher seated on his doorstep, scribbling furiously onto a scroll by lamplight. He looks up as you pass, offering a slight nod. "Out late?" he asks, his voice dry but not unkind. You nod in return, unsure why you stop, but you do. He eyes you shrewdly as if sensing the storm still swirling in your head. "Ah," he says with the faintest smile, "you've come from the palace." You blink in surprise, but he simply chuckles softly. "The scent of rosemary and honey clings to you," he explains, "and the look of a man who's been fed more questions than answers." You can't help but smile at his accuracy. He gestures toward the step beside him, and you sit, the stone cool beneath you. For a moment neither of you speaks. The only sounds are the distant hoot of an owl and the soft scratching of his pen against parchment. Finally he speaks again, his tone casual but purposeful. "You know," he says, "the emperor's feast wasn't truly about food." You glance at him curious. "It was about power," he continues, his eyes never leaving his scroll. "About reminding everyone that their appetites, physical, political, or otherwise, are all subject to his whims." He finally looks at you, his gaze sharp. "And tonight you've seen it clearly. Control doesn't always come from the sword. Sometimes it comes from a bowl of lentils and a riddle about hunger." You nod slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle over you like a heavy cloak. He smiles again, a small, knowing smile. "Take comfort," he says, returning to his writing. "At least you've been granted a rare gift." You raise an eyebrow. He chuckles softly. "You've witnessed how the mighty dine." His voice drops to a whisper, as if sharing a secret just between the two of you. And now, he says, you'll never look at your own hunger quite the same way again. You sit in silence as he returns to his scroll, the soft flicker of lamplight casting long shadows on the walls. And as you finally rise and continue down the street, you realize something unsettling, but oddly calming. The Emperor wasn't just testing his guests, he was testing you too. And whether you like it or not, you passed. The streets grow quieter as you drift farther from the heart of the city, the night deepening around you like a heavy velvet curtain. The lamps burn lower here, casting faint halos of light against the worn stone walls, their flickers barely keeping the shadows at bay. But the conversation with the old philosopher lingers in your mind, clinging to your thoughts, like the scent of honey and roasted herbs still clinging to your clothes. You wonder, with a half-smile, whether everyone leaving the palace tonight feels the same, quietly unsettled, carrying more than just a full stomach home. As you walk, the grand avenues of the city slowly give way to narrower lanes, their cobbles uneven and slick with the dampness of night. Here, the air smells less of perfumes and spices and more of wet earth and smoke from distant hearths. And yet, even in this humbler part of Rome, you can feel it, that same hum beneath everything. Hunger. Not the immediate craving for food, but that deeper ache, the desire for more comfort, more power, more certainty, and in this city everyone is chasing something. You pass by a small shrine tucked between two buildings, its niche barely large enough to hold the tiny statue of a household god. A few wilted flowers and offerings of figs and coins sit at its base, left by those hoping for favour, protection, or perhaps just a bit of luck. You pause for a moment studying the offerings, and you can't help but think back to the Emperor's words. Hunger rules every feast. The thought makes you smile, wry and tired, because here, even the gods are being fed. As you resume walking, your mind drifts back to the feast itself, not just the odd dishes or the Emperor's riddles, but the way the night unfolded like a carefully choreographed play. Every course, every speech, every glance across the table, it was all deliberate. And you realize something else, something unsettling but impossible to ignore. The Emperor didn't just control what they ate, he controlled when they felt satisfied. He dictated their discomfort, then slowly offered them relief, until even the most skeptical guests were smiling and clapping along by the end. Not because the food was extraordinary, it wasn't, but because he had shown them that their appetites could be bent, reshaped, even weaponized. It wasn't about barley or honeyed pears. It was about obedience. And in that realization, you feel the smallest chill ripple down your spine, because suddenly the feast feels less like a dinner, and more like a rehearsal. A quiet test of how easily the rulers of Rome could be led by the nose, their pride softened with honey and lentils, their resistance crumbled under the weight of riddles and roasted carrots. You stop at a fountain, its water still running clear under the moonlight, and splash your face to shake off the unease creeping up your neck. But even as the cold water trickles down your skin, the thought won't leave you. If the Emperor could bend his closest allies and senators so easily in the privacy of a dining hall, what else might he be planning? What grander feast? What grander trap might be waiting just beyond the horizon? You lean over the edge of the fountain, watching the ripples distort your reflection. And you can't help but smirk at yourself. Look at you, just another face in the crowd, another Roman wandering the streets after midnight, haunted by nothing more than lentil stew and honey jelly. You chuckle softly under your breath, the sound swallowed by the quiet night. Perhaps you're overthinking it. Perhaps it really was just a strange dinner, nothing more. But as you straighten and continue walking, you can't help but remember the Emperor's last words as he disappeared from the hall. remember hunger always returns. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the calm surface you wear so well, you know he was right, because already you can feel it, that quiet, gnawing little hunger creeping back. Not for food, but for answers. And Rome has never been known for feeding those kindly. The streets narrow even further as you wander deeper into the quietest parts of the city, where even the moonlight struggles to slip between the leaning walls of old tenements and shuttered shops. You pass windows glowing faintly with candlelight, catching occasional glimpses of everyday life. Families gathered around small tables, old men sipping watered-down wine, lovers murmuring in corners. But even here, away from the marble columns and gilded palaces, you sense it again. That quiet hunger, simmering beneath the surface, not for bread or figs, but for something else entirely. You know the feeling all too well now. It's the same itch that's been crawling under your skin since you left the palace, the same question that keeps circling your thoughts, no matter how you try to shake it. What exactly was the Emperor trying to prove tonight? You've seen plenty of strange spectacles in Rome, parades with elephants and caged tigers, festivals where wine flowed like water, even senators brawling in the forum over who had the right to wear a wider stripe on their toga. But this was something different. This wasn't about spectacle for its own sake. It wasn't about showing wealth or decadence. It was something quieter, sharper, control. You pause beneath an old archway, its bricks worn smooth by centuries of hands passing over them, and lean back against the cool stone. The Emperor's words echo in your mind again, soft but insistent. Hunger rules every feast. He wasn't talking about food. He was talking about power. You close your eyes, letting the night air wash over you, and slowly the entire night begins to unfold again in your mind. Every detail, every shift in tone, every glance shared between guests. It was all too perfect. He started with discomfort, stripping away their expectations, replacing roasted boars and sweet wines with lentils, barley, and cabbage. He let them squirm, let them complain, watched them mock and resist. Then came the slow seduction, the carefully spiced dishes, the sweet honeyed pears, the clever riddles. He turned their discomfort into amusement, their mockery into laughter, their resistance into reluctant admiration. And just when they thought themselves safe, sated, content, at ease, he slipped in the truth that their hunger wasn't just physical, that it could be shaped, led, controlled. And they never even noticed it happening. By the end of the night, they were cheering him, raising their goblets, toasting to spirit, to moderation, to him. It was brilliant, terrifyingly brilliant. You open your eyes and exhale slowly, the weight of it pressing down on you. Because if he could do that with a dinner table, what else could he do? What other hungers might he be planning to stir? You push away from the wall and resume walking, your mind now fully awake, despite the late hour. And as you move through the city, past statues and fountains and shadowed alleyways, you start to see it everywhere. The same quiet hunger tucked into every corner of Rome. The merchant dreaming of higher profits, the senator longing for another term, the soldier hoping for glory on some distant frontier. Even the street urchin watching you from the shadows, eyes glinting with the same familiar desire. Everyone in this city wants something, and the Emperor, he knows it, he's counting on it. You finally reach your modest home, a small room above a baker's shop, the smell of rising dough faint even now, and pause at the threshold. One last thought drifts through your mind, soft and unsettling. Tonight wasn't about convincing Rome to embrace lentils or seaweed jelly. It was about showing that even the proudest men in Rome could be made to crave what they were told to crave, to hunger for what seemed unthinkable. And if he could do that with food, what else might he feed them next? You step inside, closing the door behind you, but you know it's too late. That question is already inside you. And you suspect it will take far longer to digest than any meal ever could. The door clicks shut behind you, muffling the quiet city sounds outside. Inside your room, the air is still, heavy with the lingering scent of baked bread from the shop below. You light a small oil lamp, its flame flickering to life, casting soft shadows that dance across the walls. But there's no comfort in it tonight. You sit by the narrow window, staring out over the rooftops, where the moon floats low and pale above the city. The streets below look calm, but now you know better. Underneath that calm lies something restless. You've seen it too clearly to pretend otherwise. Your thoughts circle back, again and again, to the Emperor. His calm voice, his amused glances, the way he toyed with the room like a puppeteer pulling strings, offering discomfort, then relief, then revelation. It wasn't just about control, it was about pleasure. He enjoyed it. That realization hits you harder than expected. It wasn't enough for him to test them, to bend their wills. He had to savor it, to watch them dance, to turn their hunger into his entertainment. You lean back, staring at the ceiling beams above, trying to untangle your thoughts. But it's no use. Every time you trace back the night's events, it all leads to the same place. He doesn't just want to control Rome, he wants Rome to thank him for it. You think about the faces you saw at the feast. Senators, generals, merchants, men who command armies, wealth, influence. They sat there spooning lentil mash into their mouths, laughing at his riddles, cheering at his words. And not one of them walked away angry. Not one stormed out. They left pleased, satisfied. Worse yet, they felt grateful. Grateful to have been manipulated. You rub your hands over your face, trying to chase away the creeping unease settling in your chest. This isn't just politics. This isn't the usual game of bribes and threats and whispered deals in the bathhouses. This is something far more dangerous. He's shown them that their power means nothing at his table, that even their most basic instincts, what they crave, what they enjoy, can be shifted on his whim. And they accepted it. Gladly. You rise from your chair and pace the small room, the floor creaking under your steps. It's all too clear now. Tonight wasn't the beginning of something, it was the proof. Proof that he's ready, that he can move beyond games of appetite into something deeper. You think back to his words at the end, quiet but sharp as a dagger in the dark. Remember, hunger always returns. You freeze, the weight of it settling over you. That wasn't a farewell. That was a promise. You realize suddenly you weren't just a bystander tonight. You were a witness to the first ripple of something much larger, and now you can't unsee it. You sit down heavily, staring at the flame of your oil lamp, watching it sway. A tiny part of you wonders, why you? Why were you drawn to stay so late, to listen so closely, to notice what others didn't? But deep down, you already know the answer, because you felt that same hunger too. The hunger to understand, to see, to know the hidden layers beneath the feast. You let out a breathless laugh, soft and resigned. That's it, isn't it? You were always part of the meal. You just didn't realize it until now. You lean forward, extinguishing the lamp with a slow, deliberate breath. Darkness folds around you, soft and complete. But as you lie down, your mind still whirls. You know sleep will come late tonight, because once you've tasted this kind of knowledge, it lingers. And like the Emperor warned, hunger always returns. Sleep comes slowly, and when it does, it's thin and restless, like trying to rest on shifting sand. You drift in and out, your mind tangled in strange dreams, visions of endless banquet tables, plates piled high with roasted vegetables shaped like coins and crowns, and the emperor's voice echoing through cavernous halls, soft and steady. Eat what I offer, want what I choose. You jolt awake before dawn, the city still wrapped in quiet darkness. The only sounds the occasional cry of a night bird or the faint splash of water from distant fountains. Your room feels smaller somehow, the air heavier. You sit up, running a hand over your face, the weight of the night before still pressing on your chest. You know you can't shake it off with sleep. The Emperor's words cling to you like the scent of smoke after a fire. You rise, moving through the familiar motions of dressing, though your hands feel distant, as if they belong to someone else. You barely notice the rough linen tunic sliding over your shoulders, or the sandals you fasten with trembling fingers. Outside, the city remains hushed, but there's a faint glow beginning to creep over the rooftops, the first hint of morning. The streets are nearly empty, save for a few bakers starting their fires and vendors arranging their stalls in the marketplace. You walk. You don't know where you're going, not really. But your feet find their way toward the forum, drawn by some quiet instinct, as if the stones themselves might offer clarity. The city feels different in this early hour. There's no shouting, no clatter of carts or haggling voices, just the soft sweep of brooms, the murmur of morning prayers whispered at small shrines, and the steady beat of your own footsteps. And yet, even in this quiet, you feel it again. That same undercurrent you noticed the night before. Hunger. You see it in the way a vendor sharpens his knife with slow, precise strokes, his eyes already calculating profits yet to be made. In the way a young man hurries past you, his arms full of scrolls, his expression pinched and determined, chasing the next rung of ambition, no doubt. In the way an old woman lingers by a fountain, offering a few coins and a whispered prayer for something unseen. Everywhere you look, it's there. Rome itself is hungry. Not for food, though there's always that, but for something deeper. Power, safety, legacy, meaning. It's baked into the walls, carved into the statues, flowing through the aqueducts with every drop of water. And now you realize the Emperor isn't merely feeding it, he's shaping it. You stop at the steps of the Senate, staring up at the marble columns looming above, bathed in the soft blush of dawn. Inside those walls, men will gather later today, arguing, scheming, making deals over wine and olives. But you already know their fate was sealed last night. They've been softened, reshaped like dough under skilled hands. They laughed at the feast, mocked the dishes, but they left with more than full bellies. They left willing. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the cool morning air wash over you, trying to steady the weight of this truth. The Emperor doesn't need to conquer them by force. He already has. Through lentils and riddles, through honey and barley, through charm and slow deliberate hunger. And worse still, they ask for it. You open your eyes again, watching the city begin to stir, the first carts creaking through the streets, carrying bread and amphorae and clay pots. Life goes on as it always does. But you feel different now. Because you've seen behind the curtain. You've tasted the quiet power that lies beneath the surface. And you know this wasn't just a meal, it was a map, a blueprint for how the Emperor intends to rule in the days to come. Not with armies, but with hunger. With the slow, steady hand of someone who knows exactly how to keep a city craving more. You step away from the Senate steps, your heart heavy but steady, your thoughts sharper than ever. Because now you see it everywhere, in every handshake, every bargain, every shared loaf of bread. The feast has only just begun. And Rome, for all its glory, will never stop eating. The sun begins to rise in earnest now. casting soft gold over the city's rooftops, transforming the marble columns and statues into something almost divine. You watch as shadows shrink, replaced by warm light creeping slowly over the forum. But instead of comfort, the growing brightness only sharpens everything. Every crack in the pavement, every chipped column, every weary face you pass on the street. Nothing can hide under daylight. You keep walking, further from the familiar streets of your neighborhood, deeper into the districts where the old temples sit in quiet disrepair, their steps worn smooth by centuries of prayers and politics. Here, the streets are almost empty, save for a few early risers, priests preparing incense, cleaners scrubbing temple floors, beggars staking out spots where the midday crowds will pass. And you wonder as you walk, how many of these people truly understand the kind of game that was played last night? How many of them realize that while they sleep and labor and pray, their rulers dine on more than just figs and wine? That in quiet rooms, over clever dishes, decisions are made that shape everything. It's almost funny. The common folk worry about bread, about taxes and harvests and market prices. But the men in power, they've moved beyond that. They've begun feeding something else entirely. Desire. You pause in front of a temple dedicated to Ceres, the goddess of grain, and watch as a young priestess lights a small offering of barley and honey cakes. The scent rises into the air, soft and sweet. You wonder briefly whether the emperor would find this amusing, this simple ancient offering to the goddess of the harvest, so humble compared to his feast of illusions. And then it strikes you, that's exactly the point. He's become his own god of hunger. He's taken the role from the old gods. No need for Ceres or Bacchus or Fortuna anymore. He controls appetite now, directs it where he wishes, makes it fashionable, noble, inevitable. And the city follows, smiling all the while. You feel a strange hollow laugh rise in your throat, but you stifle it quickly. No one here would understand. How could they? They weren't at that table. They didn't taste the way laughter turns into obedience, how ridicule becomes reverence. But you did. And now you can't stop seeing it. In the market stalls where merchants push the exotic, dates from Africa, spices from the East, salted fish from Gaul, all selling not just goods but desires. In the temples where prayers aren't about piety, but bargains. Offerings left in exchange for love, fortune, revenge. In the forum where every deal struck isn't about laws or justice, but about favours, debts, influence. It's everywhere. That same quiet feast playing out, again and again, in every corner of the city. And the emperor? He's merely the first to admit it openly. You take a long breath and step away from the temple, your thoughts heavy but focused. You understand now why the emperor smiled so easily last night. Why he seemed so relaxed as his guests squirmed and grumbled. He wasn't risking anything. He was simply showing them the truth of their own lives. That every man in Rome is hungry, and sooner or later they'll all come to the table. You glance back one last time at the temple, the smoke curling lazily into the sky, and for the first time you feel it clearly. This city will never be satisfied. No matter how much it devours, grain, gold, glory, it will always want more. And somewhere in his palace, the emperor is waiting, watching, smiling, preparing the next course. By now, the streets are fully alive. Merchants call out their prices with booming voices, carts rattle over cobblestones, and the sharp scent of fresh bread and roasted chestnuts drifts through the air. The city has shaken off its quiet slumber, slipping back into its usual rhythm. But you walk through it as if wrapped in glass, detached, separate, because you can't stop hearing his voice, soft, calm, and just slightly amused, curling around your thoughts like smoke. hunger always returns. You pass through the market square, watching as people haggle over olives and bolts of linen, their faces animated and eager. You notice how quickly they shift, from frustration to laughter, from reluctance to desire, all within the span of a few coins and a clever smile. It's almost too easy. You watch a butcher wave a strip of salted pork under the nose of a hesitant customer. She shakes her head at first, but then he leans in close, murmuring something only she can hear. Her resistance crumbles. Moments later, she's counting out her coins, laughing at her own weakness. You don't even have to hear the words. You already know the game. He offered her hunger. Then, relief. And she thanked him for it. You keep walking, your heart tightening with every step. Because once you've seen this pattern, you can't stop seeing it. It's in every bargain, every flirtation, every whispered deal. A push, a pull, a gift, a debt. Every interaction is a transaction, a slow dance around appetite. You pause at the edge of the forum, watching the senators begin to gather for their daily debates. Their purple-striped togas gleam in the sunlight, their faces composed, dignified, perfect masks of Roman virtue. But now you know better. You saw them last night, their mouths full of lentils and honey, their eyes softening as they laughed at riddles and toasted to moderation. They've already been fed. They'll arrive today pretending to argue about taxes or laws, but their loyalties have already shifted, quietly, invisibly, beneath the weight of last night's feast. And the emperor will need no sword to keep them in line. He's already fed their deeper hunger, their desire to belong, to be seen, to be clever, compliant, safe. And they walked right into it, believing all the while they were simply enjoying a meal. You lean against a pillar, watching them disappear into the marble halls of the Senate. They have no idea they've already been led to the table again, and the more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Because it's not just them. It's not just the powerful or the wealthy. It's everyone. This city thrives on hunger, not just physical hunger, but deeper cravings. The longing for status, affection, security, meaning. And once someone knows how to feed that hunger, they own you. You shiver, though the sun has already warmed the streets, because now you understand something you hadn't quite grasped last night. The Emperor isn't merely using this power. He's studying it, perfecting it. That dinner was just an experiment, a small test on a handful of Rome's elite. And it worked. Soon there'll be another test, a bigger one, a festival perhaps, a citywide decree, a new tradition dressed up in sweet words and clever symbols, and the people will flock to it, eager to taste what's offered. Because they'll think it's their choice. You push away from the pillar and walk faster now, weaving through the crowds, your pulse quickening. You don't know what he'll serve next, but you know it's coming. And you know deep in your bones that they'll swallow it whole, gladly. Because hunger doesn't need force, it only needs patience, and the Emperor has plenty of that. You move through the streets now with a purpose, though you aren't sure where it will take you. Your feet seem to know before your mind does, weaving through alleyways and open squares, carrying you away from the markets and deeper into the quieter districts of the city. You pass under an archway, its stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and emerge onto a narrow street lined with the homes of Rome's intellectuals, philosophers, poets, teachers. The smell here is different, less of spices and oil, more of parchment, ink, and the faint musk of old stone in cooler, shaded courtyards. You pause for a moment outside the domus of an old teacher you once knew, an aging scholar who taught you your letters long before you became the quiet observer of Rome's undercurrents. His windows are open as they always were, the sounds of his students drifting softly into the street, recitations of Virgil, debates over ethics, the occasional stifled laugh at some quiet joke. And yet even here you can feel it, that same hunger. These students, scribbling diligently by lamplight, aren't studying purely for wisdom or the joy of learning. They are sharpening their minds like swords, preparing to rise. Each of them hungers, not for bread or wine, but for something sharper. Reputation, influence, the soft power of clever words. You smile bitterly. The emperor would approve. In fact, you suspect he'd find it amusing to watch these young men so eager to debate morality, all while playing the same game as every merchant and senator in the city. They too are waiting to be fed. Fed opportunities, connections, scraps of praise from the right mouths. And you now understand what the emperor knows too well. Rome doesn't run on laws or legions. It runs on appetite. You step away from the house and continue down the street, the city opening wider before you. Everywhere you look now, you see it. The baker's apprentice watching his master's customers with envy, dreaming of the day the shop is his. The guards lounging near a fountain, laughing, but one eye always drifting toward the wealthier passers-by. The lovers whispering in a shaded garden, each secretly calculating how much affection to offer and how much to withhold. Everyone in this city, every single one, is waiting to be fed. And once they've been shown that their hungers can be satisfied by someone else, they will return to that table again and again. Always. You think back to last night, the laughter, the surprise, the eventual surrender. How easily they all gave in, and how none of them even realized they'd been led there. The emperor hadn't forced anything upon them. He hadn't threatened or bribed. He simply invited them to taste. And they had followed, willingly. You stop near the edge of a public garden, staring out across the neatly trimmed hedges and quiet pools where old men sit to gossip, playing at being above the world's concerns. But you know better. Every word they trade here is another kind of currency. Every story a morsel passed from one hand to another. This city doesn't just hunger, it feeds itself endlessly, chewing through every man, every story, every ambition. The emperor has simply mastered its natural rhythm. You lean against a column, your thoughts heavy, your breath slow, and suddenly the full shape of it becomes clear. Last night's feast wasn't just a test, it was a blueprint, a demonstration of a new kind of rule, one where swords and walls matter far less than desire itself. And the most terrifying part? It works. Because no one, not the poorest beggar, not the richest senator, can resist the slow, careful feeding of their hidden hunger. And once they've tasted it, they will always come back for more. You feel it within yourself too, that itch, that gnawing curiosity pulling at you still. You've been trying to fight it, trying to walk it off, to think your way around it. But the truth is undeniable. You're hungry too, not for food, but for what comes next, for what the emperor's next feast will be. And despite everything you've seen, despite every warning your mind whispers, you know one simple, chilling truth. When he calls again, you'll go. Because in Rome, hunger isn't just a weakness, it's the law. You don't know how long you stand there leaning against that column, watching the city quietly feed itself in 1,000 small ways. But eventually the sun climbs higher, the shadows shrink, and the garden empties, leaving only a few old men still whispering on benches, their hands fluttering like birds as they pass rumours back and forth. You step away, pulled once again by that quiet instinct, your legs moving before your mind can catch up, through streets dappled with sunlight, past shopkeepers stacking amphorae, past children chasing stray dogs with shrieks of laughter, past courtyards where women knead dough and spin wool. Everything seems normal. Everything is normal. And yet it isn't. Not for you, not anymore. Because you see it everywhere now. How every smile hides a negotiation. how every shared meal masks a quiet exchange of power, how every act of kindness has its cost. It's not just politics, it's survival. And the Emperor, he understands this better than anyone. You remember the way he spoke last night. So soft, so certain, as if he wasn't explaining anything at all, merely pointing out something everyone should have known all along. Hunger rules every feast. Of course it does. You knew it too once you heard him say it, because you felt it your entire life, every time you bartered for a better place in line at the baths, every time you paid extra for a better cut of meat at the market, every time you held your tongue in front of a magistrate, knowing silence would serve you better than truth. It was always there. This is simply the first time anyone's dared to say it. You keep walking, and soon, almost without meaning to, you find yourself standing at the edge of the Palatine Hill, gazing up at the sprawling marble and stone of the Imperial Palace. From here it looks like something out of a dream, perched high above the city, serene and untouchable, its rooftops gleaming in the midday sun. But you know better now. You've been inside, you've seen the theatre behind those walls, and you know exactly what's happening beyond those columns right now. He's planning the next course. You can almost see him, seated at some quiet table, fingers tapping thoughtfully on a cup of watered wine, sketching the outline of another grand performance, another night of laughter, riddles, honeyed words, and slow, irresistible surrender. He'll invite them again, the senators, the generals, the merchants, perhaps even some of the commoners this time. He'll make it seem like a game, a novelty, a harmless experiment, and they'll go, gladly, because they won't remember the lesson of last night. Not truly. They'll only remember the sweetness at the end, the comfort of belonging, of being seen, of being praised for their cleverness as they solved his riddles and laughed at his jokes. They'll think they were in control the entire time, and they'll return to him again and again, thinking it's their choice. You stare up at the palace, your breath steady now, your heart strangely calm, because suddenly you aren't angry, you aren't afraid, you're impressed, deeply, uncomfortably impressed. He's not just a ruler, he's a master of appetite. He's doing what no legion, no tax collector, no senator could ever accomplish. He's turning hunger itself into a leash, and Rome into his obedient dog. And the worst part, it's brilliant, because there's no defense against it, not when you don't even realize you're already chewing the bait. You let out a quiet, breathless laugh, shaking your head as you turn away from the view. You know now that this story doesn't end with a single feast. It's only just begun, and you, for better or worse, are already seated at the table. Because the Emperor was right, hunger always returns. And when it does, you'll be right back where he wants you, fork in hand, waiting for your next bite. You walk away from the Palatine Hill, the image of that looming palace burning in your mind with every step. No matter how far you move from it, you can still feel its weight behind you, watching, patient, as if the Emperor himself were still seated there, smiling faintly, knowing exactly where your thoughts would wander next. You wander through Rome's quieter lanes now, where the streets narrow and twist, away from the grandeur of the Forum and the polished stone of the Senate. Here the walls lean inward, hung with faded laundry and creeping ivy. The sounds of the city soften, just the creak of shutters, the murmur of voices through open windows, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. But even here, among these weathered homes and worn sandals, it lingers. Hunger. You watch a mother barter with a fishmonger, her voice sharp but her eyes anxious, weighing every coin, every scrap of silver, balancing her family's future with the price of salted cod. A pair of young men pass you, their arms filled with bundles of firewood. They speak low and quick, their voices tense. Not about wood, but about wagers placed and debts owed. Even here, Even in these quiet corners, they're playing the same game. Appetite, risk, reward. And the emperor knows it. That's what chills you most. Not that he's manipulating the powerful. Rome has always been a city where the powerful trade favors like coin. But that he sees everyone this way. The rich, the poor, the merchant, the beggar, the soldier, on leave, the priest burning incense. He knows that all of Rome is bound by the same thread. Desire, need, hunger, and now you see the full shape of it, clearer than you did even last night. His feast wasn't simply about mocking gluttony or showing that power could wear the disguise of moderation. It was a mirror. He showed every guest their reflection, not the man they thought themselves to be, but the creature underneath, the one that hungers. He wanted them to laugh at the absurdity, to ease into it, to find comfort in their shared appetite. And they did. You did. You remember the way you chuckled in the shadows at the senator's jokes, at the moulded chickpea birds, at the seaweed jelly, shimmering like some ridiculous treasure. You thought yourself above it, just an observer, untouched by the spell. But now you know better. You were fed too, not with the food, but with the same pleasure, the same curiosity, the same delicious sense of watching power shift, just out of sight. And that's the trap, isn't it? No one leaves the table untouched. You pass a small shrine tucked against a crumbling wall, its niche filled with candles burned down to puddles and offerings of bread crusts and cheap wine. A simple, desperate prayer for favour. You almost laugh at the sight, not from cruelty, but from the strange, dizzying realization that the people leaving their prayers here aren't so different from the senators you watched last night. They're all feeding something they can't name, hoping it will satisfy. And the emperor, he's simply the first to admit it out loud. You keep walking, letting the thought settle over you like a weight. It's not the feast that haunts you now. It's the question it leaves behind. How long until he serves another? Because you know he will. You can feel it as surely as the sun rising behind you, heating the stone streets beneath your feet. This was only the beginning. The first course. A taste. He's already planning the next. And the city, hungry, eager, foolish, will come running. You glance back once toward the distant palace, its silhouette now softened by heat and distance, but no less imposing. And you wonder, with a shiver that slips down your spine, when that next feast comes, will you be able to resist the invitation? Or, like the others, will you find yourself walking toward the table again? Smiling, grateful, hungry. The day drifts on, the sun climbing high, casting sharp shadows across the streets as Rome reaches its noisy peak. Crowds press through the markets, voices rise in barter and gossip. The scent of roasting meat and crushed herbs fills the air. But you move through it all untouched, wrapped in a strange calm now. Because the question isn't if another feast will come. It's when. And worse, you already know that when it comes, you won't just watch from the shadows this time. You'll go. You'll sit at the table. Because something inside you has shifted, something you hadn't expected. Curiosity. You want to know what happens next. You want to see what new game the emperor will play, what new dish he'll serve, what new hunger he'll awaken in the hearts of men who swear they've conquered every desire. And that realization settles over you with a cold, undeniable weight. He's already won. Not through fear or force, not through bribes or blackmail, but through something far subtler and far stronger. He's made you want to return. That's his real power. Not that he controls Rome's appetites, but that he makes you complicit in your own, and you suspect he knew that from the very beginning. As you weave through the crowd, You catch glimpses of familiar faces, the senators from the feast, their heads bent together in quiet conversation, merchants laughing over shared wine, even a few of the emperor's advisors, moving with that careful ease that marks men who believe themselves above suspicion. They all look calm, content, satisfied. But you know better. You can see the hunger lingering behind their eyes now, quiet, patient, waiting for its next meal. You wonder as you watch them whether they even recognize it, whether they realize they're already leaning toward the next invitation, their mouths already watering for the next taste of whatever clever, decadent dish he'll place before them. Probably not. That's the beauty of it. They'll think it's their choice. They'll believe they're in control, laughing and toasting and pretending they've mastered their own cravings. But beneath it all, they're no different from the dogs in the street, sniffing the air, chasing the scent, always returning to the same door for scraps. And when they do, the emperor will be waiting. You reach the edge of the city now, where the streets begin to thin, and the noise fades into the steady hum of cicadas and wind through olive trees. From here, you can see the whole of Rome stretched before you, its domes and spires, its smoky rooftops and bustling avenues, the great marble structures shining under the afternoon sun. It looks peaceful, timeless. But beneath that beauty, you know it's just a larger version of the table you sat beside last night. A city-sized banquet, every citizen seated without realizing it. And the emperor, he's the master of the feast, patient, smiling, ready to serve. And here you stand, outside of it all, yet still seated in your own way. You exhale slowly, watching as the breeze stirs the leaves around you. You know there's no walking away now, because you've already tasted the truth. And the truth is this: hunger always returns. And when it does, you'll go back, not because you're forced to, but because deep down, you want to. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, bathing the city in amber light, softening the edges of Rome's sharp walls and worn streets. Shadows stretch long and thin, weaving through alleyways and curling beneath arches. You remain on that hilltop, watching it all with a strange, steady quiet inside you. You've walked every street, listened to every whisper, and you understand now, far more clearly than you ever wanted to. Rome isn't a city built on stone or law or even conquest. It's built on hunger, endless, shifting, layered hunger. And the emperor sitting somewhere behind those high marble walls isn't merely indulging that hunger. He's nurturing it, guiding it, feeding it in measured, deliberate portions. And each time he does, the city grows more eager, more loyal, more entangled in its craving for him. You can almost hear it now, faint but constant beneath the din of the marketplace and the fading clatter of sandals on stone, the slow, steady gnawing of desire. It's everywhere, and it will never stop. You watch as the streets slowly begin to empty, the citizens retreating to their homes, the market stalls shuttering for the night, the city settling into its quieter rhythms again. But beneath it all, you can still feel it, like a heartbeat under the cobblestones. They're waiting, all of them, waiting for the next festival, the next decree, the next invitation to gather and be fed, whether by bread, by games, by promises, or by something subtler still. And when the emperor calls, they will come. Gladly, eagerly, hungrily, because they always do. And you realize, with a calm that almost startles you, that you'll be among them. You won't resist the next invitation. You won't sit apart from the table, pretending you're merely an observer, untouched by the game. You'll take your seat. You'll eat what's served, and you'll watch, because you have to know where it leads. You let out a slow breath as the last sliver of sun slips behind the hills, leaving Rome bathed in soft dusk. The air grows cooler, but there's no chill in you anymore. Only acceptance. You turn away from the view, your steps slow but certain as you make your way back down toward the heart of the city. Because you know the truth now. This hunger isn't something you can escape. It isn't something you can fight. It's part of you. It's part of everyone. And when the next feast is laid, you'll be there, along with every other soul in Rome, fork in hand, eyes wide, smiling, waiting to be fed. Because the emperor was right. Hunger always returns, and you're already starving. Softened closing. Whispered slow. So now, let the city grow quiet again. Let the streets grow still. Let the shadows deepen and the lamps flicker low. You've seen enough for tonight. The table is empty, for now. But it will not stay empty for long. Soon the call will go out again, and you'll feel it in your bones when it comes. That quiet tug, that soft ache, the familiar pull of hunger, whispering beneath everything. And when it stirs again, you'll return. Because no one resists forever. Not in Rome, not anywhere, not you. End of script. Sweet dreams.